There's a story told about a father and son who had a really good relationship. Among the memories that they shared, one memory stood out in particular above all the others. It was a hiking trip that they took up a high mountain. And it was in the course of that trip and getting to the top that they really had a great conversation, came to understand one another in a deep way, and were really thankful for their relationship. After they returned home, days went by and things didn't seem to run as smoothly as they did on that day up the mountain. Dad yelled at his son, and then his son in anger yelled back some hurtful words. About an hour later, the air had cleared, and the son came and said, "Dad, whenever it starts to get like this again, let's just say to one another, the mountaintop. And then we'll remember that exchange we had on that mountain, and things were so good between us." So they agreed to do so. In a few weeks, another misunderstanding occurred, and the boy was sent to his room in tears. After a while, the father decided to get up and he needed to finish the conversation. And he was still a bit angry until he came and saw a piece of paper pinned to the door of his son's room. The boy had penciled 3 large words, "the mountaintop." And the dad knew he needed to enter into that relationship in a different way. Today we go to the mountain with Jesus. In the verses just before today's gospel, Jesus tells his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, suffer greatly, and be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised. Peter didn't want to hear any of that. But Jesus was revealing to his disciples God's plan of salvation. He was preparing them for his death and resurrection. Now, the disciples knew what it meant to suffer, and they knew the pain that comes from the death of a loved one. But to be raised up, what was that all about? So Jesus took the disciples up the mountain and gave them a glimpse of his glory to be revealed. It was an awesome and frightful sight for the apostles, something they had never experienced before, something so amazing. In seeing Moses, the keeper of the law, and Elijah representing the prophets, the disciples see in one vision before them the revelation of salvation history, a journey that began way back with Abram, who became Abraham, our father in faith. Abraham, who trusted in God to leave everything behind and to travel to a new land. In the Transfiguration, Jesus reveals that his messianic suffering is the fulfillment of God's plan of salvation. It's significant that Jesus reveals God's plan of salvation to Peter, James, and John. They don't receive the gift individually, but collectively as a community. It's a reminder to all of us of the importance of community as we walk in faith. Peter, James, and John share with us the vision they experienced at that time of transfiguration. They do so in order to strengthen the community of believers. And they do so to strengthen us today. Through the waters of baptism, our lives have been changed forever. We received a new identity as children of God. In St. Paul's letter to Timothy, we heard, God has saved us and called us to a holy life, not according to our works, but according to his own design. In destroying sin and death, Christ has given us a gift, the bright promise of everlasting life, the promise that we are glory bound. In this season of Lent, we're invited to reclaim our identity as children of God, to do the work of ongoing conversion and transformation so that our true self will shine. But each of us knows change is not easy. Life is difficult. We get comfortable listening to ourselves and our own rationalizations, and we fail to listen to the Lord's voice. We see and live in a world very different from the one God dreams for us, and we give in to temptation and sin. All too often, rather than bearing our share of the hardships of the gospel, we seek an easy way out by instant gratification, or we grow impatient and angry with one another, or we simply doubt God's love for us. In other words, we stop growing spiritually. So by picking up once again the ancient tools of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, our hearts and our minds wake up to the transforming power of God at work in our lives. One powerful way of experiencing the purifying love of God is through the sacrament of reconciliation, we know as confession or penance. Ask yourself, do you feel alienated from God, the church, family, or friends? Is there a burden weighing heavily upon your heart? Have I forgotten what it's like to have a mountaintop experience where my soul becomes white as light? The good news of the sacrament of reconciliation is that there is no sin, no darkness, no valley that can keep us from Christ's mercy. The God of second chances always offers us the invitation to be reconciled to Him and to one another. Brothers and sisters, we must resist the temptation to be less than we are called to be. We are children of God. Now is the time for you and for me to turn away from sin. Now is the time for us to bear our share of the hardship of the gospel with the strength that comes from Christ. Every time we gather for the Eucharist, we return to the mountain with Jesus, as ordinary bread and wine becomes the body and blood of Jesus Christ. In this blessed sacrament, we are all made one. All who are far off are brought near. And we have a foreshadowing of what will be in the banquet feast of heaven. What joy Peter, James, and John must have known as they ventured down the mountain that day. What joy it is for us to receive the living body and blood of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. So let's truly become what we receive, the living body and blood of Christ for our world today.